Good afternoon to everyone, and it's time for Viewpoint. It's Monday. Let me start on the right foot. I want to say belated happy birthday to my good friend across the room, behind the glass, Joanne. Belated birthday greetings to you, my dear. All right. She gave me both thumbs up. All right. Getting that out of the way, I'm here with two of my guests, one of whom is going to be off to the DC town tomorrow, but whenever there's election, he comes down and he plays his part. Never did any survey this time around, but in any case, he's here to wrap up and button up his contribution to this election. And alongside him, I do have the MP George Pantophlet, who of course is here with me for the full hour. And I'm happy to have you both. Good afternoon to both of you, and thanks for coming in.
Good afternoon, Wendell, and good afternoon to the televiewers and radio listeners. Of course, it is always a pleasure to be on this program in order to give information to the public.
Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Wendell. The same here. As you know, it's always a pleasure to come back to St. Martin and have that conversation with you and your viewers.
MP, I believe it's only fitting that I give you the opportunity to reach out to the public. You just came out of what must have been a hectic election campaign that I know a lot of people wasn't very much prepared for, but in the end we had a pretty decent turnout. And you want to say something to those people who gave you the
Of course, Wendell, thank you for the opportunity. Yes, I want to say a special thanks to the 100% that voted for me, and also, of course, those that voted for the Party of National Alliance and all other parties that took part in this election. I agree with you also with regards to the turnout. It was better than expected. I will say like that I wished that more persons had come out and voted, because the whole issue, Wendell, is if you want change, you vote for change. But it is what it is, and I believe that it is important that now on the way forward, that it is time to govern. We can't change the past. We have learned from mistakes made in the past. One can see there are many different issues as to why the election turned out this way regards to the issue of 5, 7, and 1 and 2. But at the same time, we can't look back, we have to look forward. So again, I want to thank those voters, and I thank them also for the behavior, because again, Wendell, we have displayed, in contrast to many countries, even close to us, that when it comes to election, we know how to behave ourselves, to go out decently, cast our vote, and wait on the results.
But I want to bring to both of your attention that someone sent me a copy of maybe about 3 or 4 different ballots that were spoiled. And I don't know if it has been circulating, if any of you saw it, but that is a concern as well. I mean, as much as the MP just said that people should be complimented for having gone out and give their consent for who they would want to have them be represented by in Parliament, there was some very nasty stuff on those ballots. Did you manage to see any MP?
No, I haven't seen any, but at the same time, look, Wendell, it's unfortunate that, look, you either vote or you don't vote. I'd prefer you to vote. If you have issues with whatever candidate or member of Parliament or minister or whatever, then that was an opportune time to make sure that you can find at least one person, I believe, anywhere, any one of the candidates that you can vote for,
at least one,
and cast your vote. But to just do that again, it shows lack of understanding to the process and your responsibility as a voter in this island. And I agree, it's not a country. We are territory in the kingdom, and it's unfortunate, but we'll have those persons that do this, and unfortunately, I believe they are the losers in this case.
400 plus, Mr. Romney, 400 plus. But what I saw was just maybe 3, and some of what's written on those ballots, I can't even say it on here.
It's interesting that those sample ballots, or rather not samples, but legal ballots, are become public like that. I wonder why. But anyway, with that said, yeah, I think education is a key here. I think we have to start educating our people on voting, on the secrecy of the ballot. I mean, there's an opportunity that they have that lots of people around the world do not have. And if you're upset with a parliamentarian, as the MP just stated, that's your chance now to vote against
Yes.
him. When you vote and you just face, mark up your ballot with comments like that, what your ballot is no good. It's canceled.
But
So you're basically doing yourself a disservice.
but should that be ballot kept in secrecy? You mentioned a moment ago that it's strange that it's out there, but should it be kept in secrecy?
Well, I'm not sure as to the law on that, but I think it should not be just going across the internet or however they're going like that. I can't see that. I can't imagine that stuff like that would be just let out there. To be yeah.
Yeah, in addition to what Julio said, the issue with regards to it being made public, while they were doing the recount, you realized that the Electoral Council was showing you certain ballots that they said, okay, this one, it was supposed to be invalid, but it is valid based on their decision and so on, based on the criteria and stuff like that. So maybe that's why some became known, but the ones that you mentioned, that you said have been circulated, that for sure I have not seen it.
Yeah,
No,
I
I've
don't
seen
think
it.
that they would
Please, let's set this record straight. I'm not sure of it being circulated.
But,
Someone sent it to me.
But is it a good? Is it original, or is it a dummy ballot that they just use and so on? Because it would be difficult for me to understand how they would get
Access to it.
access to it once they have already did whatever they have done to it.
Yeah.
They put it in the box. I think that's it. They have no more access to it. So
Well, I
it
was
could be a dummy ballot that they're using
I
to do
was one of those people who feel that if we are knowledgeable as to what qualified these ballots to become invalid, then it would help us to determine what we need to do, let's say as media or even as the electoral council, to make sure people are knowledgeable as to how to use these ballots. If people are writing things on them as well, if that is the case, then they should be told that, to do something like that. I think you're better off not going out to vote.
And I think that would be, I would assume that will fall on some responsibility of the electoral council in order to educate. So it's good that they know, but from my point of view, or to my mind, exactly just let them, go, just giving them. We don't know how to get them, but for them to be just parade on internet or shared like that, I don't think that's a key thing. The key thing is to educate the persons. So come next election, they would know what to do, and they can emphasize that, well, certain 400, a little too much, and show a person how to vote. As a matter of fact, I met elderly lady, a senior, in the Colby area, and she do express that. For us, we seem circling a circle or taking a red pen and circling. It seems to be easy, but she said, no, there are people out there that can't. For whatever reason, they're not not educated as an education, but they're not educated of the process. See, and they would then think it's okay to do a check mark or to put an X, because basically identifying that candidate,
But
and there's where
and that becomes null and void. It's not good.
That's where I agree with Julio. I can't recall whether that was looked at in that sense, but what you're saying, Julio, I think once a person has made an indication in regards to where or who they want to vote for, be it a check mark or a cross, I think that should be accepted. But again, it's based on what the Electoral Council has stipulated in their laws as to what accepted, yes or not. But the very fact that they are showing indication as to who they want to vote for, I think that should be considered a valid vote.
And I'm not too sure, but I think it's also that you have to stay within that circle.
That's exactly
Yes.
exactly.
See?
and
So
it's
in
not
other words-
very big.
Yeah, okay. In
It
other
is
words,
very
they're saying
small.
the lines are your friends, and you have to stay within that. So once you go outside that circle, they're no longer your friend. Your vote is canceled.
And that's unfortunate.
How sacred is this, MP? Are we getting it that this is a sacred moment for the citizens having a chance to go to the polls and elect a member member of a political party to represent them in Parliament?
I believe the majority of the persons who go out to vote understand the seriousness, but of course you all have those who don't. And as Julio said, I think it's important as much as possible to educate persons and so on. The whole matter is, if you see it as, well, my vote doesn't count, then of course, you wouldn't go out. If you go, you might just, just cross it out or just mess up the ballot. But if you understand based on education, and again, it has been mentioned more than once, and I've heard you mention in programs also, the issue of the reason why and the ability for us to vote. There are people today in this 21st century who don't have that freedom to do so. And I think it's important for us to understand that. And basically what we are saying, if you don't go out and vote, is that, we are saying to the politicians, well, you do whatever you want because we have no say, and that's what you want to avoid.
We must not take out of it the hurriedly put together form of this election either. And maybe there was not enough time. I don't know if the Electoral Council was ever thinking of coming up with some form to address the amount of invalid votes we had the last time. It was 300 plus. This time it went up to over 400. So I don't know if, because we had a snap elections, if that played any MP into why we didn't address that situation.
I can't see that they're playing any significant role. I mean, the Electoral Council, they should be prepared at all times. I mean, they should be prepared at all times. Remember that.
But we're coming out of a disaster. Really?
Well, and I clearly understand that, and I don't want anyone to feel that I'm discounting that. You're coming out of disaster, but it's something that you have to do. I mean, it's just in our Constitution. Once the government is dissolved, you have to go back to the electorate. So that can understand, and that's correctly so. But it is something that we have to do.
I just brought it into the mix because
and I heard that a lot. Person saying, "Well, we just come out of disaster. People are not ready." Okay, we cannot go on how I feel or whether I'm ready or you ready, because what? At the end of the day, all persons are not going to be ready. You're going to find some that are not ready. And we govern based on a constitution. There are rules and regulations. We cannot change them in this instant to satisfy a person's feeling.
And in addition to what Julio is saying, had this been a maiden election, if I may use that term, I can understand, but we have had elections upon election and so on, under different circumstances. So to use the passing of Irma as an excuse, I don't think it's a valid one. At the same time, to consider how people feel. But as Julio said, there are times like these when, though difficult, you must put feelings behind and say, what is it? What kind of effect would my vote have on the advancement of the island in which I live, which is St. Martin? And if I have St. Martin at heart and want to see the island progress, then it means I should also be a contributor to the development of my island.
400 is a lot. That's a big number.
390.
390? That's what it came down to?
And of course, that's the invalid votes. Then I think that blank votes also is about 400. Yeah.
I would be disappointed if this is not addressed the next time we're having election. And what I mean by this is that the Electoral Council should have a budget that allow them some time, whether they use social media or whatever, but to make sure that everyone is clear on what their obligation is when it comes to the sacred moment of casting your vote.
And I would go so far as to say that they don't have to wait until the election to start that.
They can do it before.
They can do it. Now would be a prime opportunity.
So on the same issue, so what I think you're saying is that maybe a lot of the invalid votes has to do with the knowledge as how to vote.
Well, such as what I saw, that seems to be deliberate. And if we understand how sacred the moment really is, I think one would better serve to go out and cast their vote for someone, because the numbers are big, MP, really big. And I don't think we should, unless people are determined to use that moment to do that on a regular basis, and I don't think they will. They may know that they have to color within a line, but I can't be sure if they understand that writing stuff on top of the ballot is really not what the purpose for it really is. Let's go to the formation of government, because I know that's where we want to head. MP.
When I heard the issue of the informateur and so on, the choosing by the governor of but let me go back a bit. after the elections, of course, as usual, discussions take place between parties and so on as to who can form the government, form the coalition, let me put it this way. And you have often heard that it has been rushed, and therefore, eventually, because of not knowing each other's, about whatever the manifesto says and so on, that basically during the process of their governing, they find out that the differences are larger than they thought, and therefore they can't continue. My thing is the issue of the informateur is Nelson Tilly's word as a subject that was used back then, and using Dr. Anderson Ardoin and of course the former director or manager, Mr. Yamboujon, by the governor. The reasons for that I don't know, but today I think a report should be submitted as to what I think they had a particular criteria as to what they have to follow regards to reconstruction, and but the one that stood out to me of all of them was the issue of the relationship between the kingdom, the Dutch. I gotta say Dutch kingdom because we are Dutch, but there's autochtone difference and stuff like that. So I gotta differentiate because I don't consider us Dutch like them. Okay, and the whole issue is this: they're saying we should have a good relationship between ourselves and them. But the issue is, and I've said it all the time, I don't mind working with anybody, but it should be a working together to assist and to help, not to dominate and control. That's my problem. But now they show the formation. They took 7 months for it to be formed. Okay,
for the government.
For they're going to be formed, exactly. Now, whatever Dr. Nazar Ardoin does and Mr. Bourgeon has done in the report, the major said it was good. I mean, they had good discussions and so on. It still comes back to the politicians to decide how they're going to work and who they're going to work with. And basically, what I've heard along the grapevine is that if they don't, then that's where the Dutch are going to step in, and through the government, because he's the representative of the king, and they're going to put what you call a business cabinet in place. So that's what I've heard via the grapevine. But again, my whole issue is good with the informateur and so on, but it still comes back to the politician to decide with whom they're going to work.
You have a major issue, Mr. Romney, with the stipulation of a series of questions that forms part of the report that's supposed to be put together by the but you think that's undemocratic?
My concern here is with the concept of informateur. It might work perfect in the Netherlands, and I still think when it's applied in the Netherlands it's applied differently. But our concern here is St. Martin, and to not only to my mind, but clearly the concept of informateur disrupts our political process. Okay? Our democratic political process is interrupted by informateur.
How so?
And by that, here the election, right? The electorate, they voted for whoever they want in government. In this case, they voted 7, 5, 2, 1. And then, 3-4 days after, before the political process started, then you find the government informateur. People did not vote for a informateur coming in deciding who is going to govern St. Martin. And more thing is that they're giving a litmus test. And they said persons who, or the parties who supposedly agree with, and unfortunately I don't have the paper with me, I had it and for whatever reason I took it out my briefcase. So I will sort of give to the best that I could remember. Said, okay, you must see their stance of their
relationship with the government.
They agree with the reconstruction. They must agree with and so they're given a whole series. And moreover, one of the things they said, what you see that the parties would agree, so each person's, what you call that, the profile? Manifesto is in agreement with someone. And they're talking about getting the greatest broad base. And again, using the word broad base out of context. In that sense, but if they're looking at, we want to get the largest coalition, people did not vote for these persons. We voted for the political party. That's part of the democratic political process. The political parties should be one to determine who they're going to work with and who they're not going to work with.
I,
Not some person who have not been elected. In
Yeah.
that case, then there's no need for election. What we could have done is forget the elections and then take all the manifestos from these persons and match them up and say, okay, I think these two persons would work better together. So that is impeding our democracy. I would go so far as infringing on our human rights. See, and
but it's
this,
a concept that worked in the Netherlands Antilles. It's not written in law,
But
from what I
it's-
know, but it was used and used in a way that helped to bring the best possible group of people together to work in a
It's-
formation.
well, like I said, how effective it was used back then, I can't speak to that. But what I know today, in St. Martin, and this is the first time I think it's used to this extent in St. Martin. And if he had said, okay, we want a formateur, but then appoint the political party with the highest number of seats,
To
because
form
it
the-
remains in the political process. You won't have an independent person out there dictating who is going to govern and who is not going to govern. You see, that is the problem.
That is exactly
That is the problem. Okay? And besides that, the litmus test they give, so these persons must be able to work together, they must have this kind of agreement, and then go on further. They said how it came about. Came about where they had a conversation with all the political parties. Nice, that's good. Next one, the Vice President of Parliament. Hello? What does the Vice President of Parliament has to do with forming a government? Next one, the person from the Council of Advice. Hello again. What does that person, the Council of Advice, is designed what? To give advice on legislation. They can give advice as to who should govern, who should not govern. And it got even more than that. There are persons from the Electoral Council. Electoral Council job is to ensure that the election goes off, not to determine which political parties or combination that would then govern.
Do you believe this is an attempt to put something together that hopefully will last for 4 years and to avoid the ship
No,
jumping?
no, Julio just broke it down perfectly. And unfortunately, I'm going to go in this direction. An attempt by whom? How did the governor get in the picture? Who does the governor represent?
The crown.
You see, and we fail to realize the strategy that's being used. And I will say this is infringing, this is interfering, we said it, on our human rights. But again, the issue again is we need this 550 million reconstruction or whatever funds and so on. I don't know if you saw the budget, the newspaper this morning, where it said that the government have asked the CFT to give advice on the 2018 budget. Yes, front page, read the Herald.
Government asked
That's what
CFT.
the
I
front,
didn't see that.
yes, the front page. So, that matter only said I can't see nothing different to that. The whole issue is, when I saw the criteria, about 5 or 6 points, I said, wait a minute, where did this come from? Who did it come from? The governor can speak for himself, but I think it came from higher up. And you cannot force a people or an organization to work together against their will. It should be their choice. The people voted. They gave Alliance 5, they gave UD 7, they gave USP 2, and they gave the Christian Party 1. Now you are telling me now, you who have not run on a list, you who don't seemingly have any political affiliation, we should think, independent in a sense, basically that's why you were chosen, will determine based on your findings as to who will work together. That's why I said in my beginning statements, it should be determined by the politicians, those who want to run the list, those are the ones who people voted for, not the formateurs, not the governor, not any other institution.
But you have to take into account that we have other things playing that can encourage this thing. And I'm talking about the constant shift that we're experiencing in Parliament.
And if that's the objective, right, to make sure, as the person would say, stable government, okay, let us regress for a moment and think, what is causing unstable government? Do you think if you put the two largest parties together, that's going to ensure stable government? No. That has absolutely nothing
So
to
how
do with
can you
stable.
curb
What
this?
happened? Simple. Again, I'll refer back, and not only because it was drafted by my person, but we need to amend the electoral ordinance to stop that. I don't care what they do or how they say they're going. This kind of person said, well, we're going to screen ministers to make sure that they clean or take persons who got elected and put them as minister, or another thing to come up with a national government. These things are bandages that will never work. Okay, having
So what we need is legislation, you're saying?
legislation, because I could sign an agreement from now until doomsday that I will not do this, I will not do that. Does that hold me to okay? No. What holds you is the law. Okay? And they're talking about you put the two largest parties together, and that's going to bring stable government? No. As a matter of fact, history tells us that those two large parties basically can't work together. They have attempted
nothing
at
in
least
common?
twice. At least twice.
We've had a discussion this
And
morning.
then you're going to come and say we must put these persons together?
All right.
You know,
What is needed today, okay, is, I guess, when you have to go to commercial.
Yeah.
Okay.
You wanted to make a point? Let me
no,
get
no,
that in.
no,
and
no,
then
nobody,
we'll take a
nobody
break.
said. This morning we had a discussion. Oh, put the two largest parties together. I said, guys, it will not work. It will not work.
But
Human
an
nature
attempt
so-
was made.
Yes, it was. But basically, as Willie said, you need legislation to be put in place in order to deal with it.
Legislation is what we need. All right, folks, you're listening to Viewpoint and watching Viewpoint. We'll be taking a quick break and come back to this conversation. It's getting hot up in here. And welcome back to Viewpoint for today. I'm here with MP George Pantophlet from the National Alliance faction in our parliament. Of course, I believe is making his chair available anytime soon, right?
I won't say making available that day. People voted in that direction.
In that direction. And Julio Romney, of course, one who have spent lots of time assessing and analyzing the dynamics of politics, in this country. Usually comes up with a survey, sort of determining how the election would go, but did not do that this year. What was the reason?
Well, the bottom line, the reason is funding. It costs quite a bit of money, not a whole lot per se, because in this case, I just try to raise the monies in order to collect the data. I do the analysis,
Basically,
basically
on your own.
But I
You
have to get
came up with some predictions a couple of times that didn't seem realistic, but turned out to be.
election night. They were there, yeah. And you see, the person go up and they say, I guessing and stuff like that. I do not hypothesize or come up with an educational guess based on my feelings or how I think. There must be empirical evidence. But you're not saying anything.
What is
I say,
imperial
because going out there and feeling the pulse of the people,
Okay.
interviewing the people.
I just
and
want to make
finding
sure
out-
we're not talking over the heads of
Yeah,
some
and
people.
seeing exactly how they feel. And more importantly,
That's why the
getting-
survey is important.
Yeah, it's important. And you have, it's all based on the sample.
Okay.
Okay, we must get that random sample that would reflect the complete population.
Okay.
But it's a pity you didn't get to do that, because actually, if we, and I'm talking on the side of National Alliance, if we had sensed the pulse of the people, we would have thought we had gotten more seats than we got.
So a lot of guessing was in this.
I would not say guessing. The whole matter is, to be honest, we did much more campaigning this time than
Yeah.
ever before. The canvassing and so on, the marketing and so on, and that was done. However, there's always a silent majority that really in the background don't say much at all. Even when you go to campaigning, you don't get outright from them. Some do, a lot don't, as to how they're going to vote, where they're going to vote, and so on, or they remain undecided. And basically, you look at the undecided, that's what we were told very often, go back to the undecided, because those are the ones that can make a difference,
Yeah, make a difference.
And I believe that that it did take place, and we had the results are what they are. But again, getting back to the source statistics, I spoke to someone before the elections, and they were off. They have been accurate for the last 4 or 5 elections, but this time they were off a bit, because they were giving UD 7 seats, and they gave us 5 or 6 seats, and they gave USP 3 seats, and the Christian Party none.
Oh.
As you can see, it turned out
Yeah,
differently.
but if we do an assessment based on some of the conversations that we've been having, uh, a great majority of people were actually feeling that National Alliance would have come up with more seats and not the UD. And I
Because they
guess,
were more visible.
well,
But visibility
could
doesn't
that
determine much at all.
that could be true, but I believe too as well, they because of the coming together of the UD, they were looking at how much seats Democratic Party usually would secure, and how much seats the UP would have secured, and lumping it together, they felt that the DP was going to lose even more because they were already going downhill anyway, and they were saying that the National Alliance was stronger. Most people were talking that way, but of course, after the votes are counted, it's very
And
different.
from an analytical standpoint and looking at the whole thing, that you would see the merger of DP and UP should translate into strength. Okay, person would think not, but in essence, that is in reality would translate into strength as opposed to decreasing. And we see it in the election. They really haven't lose anything coming together.
Yeah, but
Okay,
that's
but
why your survey would have been so important.
yeah, to look
Yeah.
at it. Yeah, and even
Okay, hold on a second. Let me take a call. All right, let's go to the telephones. Good afternoon, caller. You're on.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yes.
I just heard you say that DP lost was on the losing side, but if you look at the calculations, good, right? DP gained 4 ministers, and UP only have 3. If you look at it, say Ms. Westcott, Mr. Lee, Mr. Mercelina, and Mr. Brownbill, all of them are from DP. And the other 3 seats that make up the 7 is Mr. Heiliger, Mr. Myers, and Mr. Biljani.
Okay.
So if that's why I realized that Ms. Westcott is doing all the talking, because her party has gained more seats than the UP party.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that contribution. But, for me in particular, it was very difficult to see both of them separately. I can only see it as one. And I'd never know where Dr. Mussolini was or where Brownbill was, because both of them are together, so you have to see them as the Democrats. It's difficult to split them apart here, and that's what this caller is trying to do.
And I think what the person, and that often like the caller and much of the persons, they still see it as DP and UP, and they put them together. One have to get over there. It's not two different parties. It's one party.
Actually, they had
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
start
but
a
it's
new
one party.
Yeah,
foundation.
it's one
Because
part, and you
it's
must see it in that context. So the effect, I'm sure, if these two parties were separate from each other, the results would have been different. And so
Yeah.
much people still thinking, oh, well, this and no. They are one. The DP and UP no longer exists.
Yeah.
One has seen that this is a brand new party, and the coming together has come some constraint.
and you can't see them separately.
Whether one party members got more votes than the other, that's neither here nor there.
Okay, let me take another call. Good afternoon, caller. Go ahead, you're on.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to make a correction based on the last caller. The names the caller mentioned, 2 of those names are from the Democratic Party. The other 5 names are from the UD party, from the up party rather. And by the way, it's one party, and it's not instead of trying to have them being separated. So if you was to consider the seats that were acquired by party per candidate, the up party would have gotten 5, and the Democratic Party would have gotten 2, based on the names that she just mentioned. I just wanted to make that quick correction.
Okay.
All right.
Here
I
you
mean,
see.
no, but
Yeah,
I don't even think we need to entertain
separate
that,
them. Yeah.
because that's not really what the reality is.
But I'm
it's
glad the
one
caller.
party.
I'm glad the caller called that,
Explain
so
that.
then the people can get a clear indication as to, if you want to separate them per se. But in this case, we should not be focused on separating. They're one unit. And you know what I would like to do before us notice the time is getting a little short, coming up. And there's some things I want to mention, particularly to the electorate, to the person that we must be mindful of this informateur thing. And Beyond that, the whole concept they're talking about a national government. Do we really understand what is a national government? Okay? National government usually come into play when there's a crisis. St. Martin's not in a crisis. We were in a crisis after the hurricane, where we had curfew and all that kind of good stuff.
That's when the move
That's when the
was
move, if
necessary.
a national government would be good, and in the sense that the national government isn't what some other person dictating now. That mean the two largest parties come together and they're gonna fall a broad base or however they might call it. No.
Especially when you had a legal process,
Yeah.
which is the election
Election
took place.
Okay?
Yeah, that's
So
right.
a national government would then what? Ignoring the
democratic rights.
election.
Mhm.
Okay? They would be
election.
down circumventing the parliamentary election and saying, okay, we're going to, if you're going to do that in the right sense, meaning you're going to take a person or a representative from every one of the political parties, even outside of the political party, and bringing them in to form a government.
How important is
That is the national government.
how important is educating our people, MP?
Oh, extremely important, I believe, and also I appreciate what Julio is doing and so on as to the issue of informing people, because, even to date, because we have what 7 years, 2010, 8 years as parliament and ministers and so on in that country, people have not still understood, and of course it's lack of information as to the difference between island council, commissioners, and when it comes to parliamentarians and ministers.
Yeah.
So I think emphasis should be placed on that. I listened to someone was saying the other day that we should really ensure that in school that it be part of our educational system where they are taught about the Westminster model, taught about the issue of how the parliament functions, the minister, the trust, political, the judiciary, those things, because lack of information makes you take wrong decisions, So,
Yeah.
and again, I think it's up to members of parliament, government, organizations that are part of this to inform the electoral council, advisory council, all of those who form or who are part of the issue of parliament regards to advice and so on, should inform the public. Let me say this, I'm going to do my part, although no longer being in parliament. I'll revert to what I did prior to getting involved in politics, is doing research, writing articles, getting information and so on, criticizing certain issues, and also coming with solutions, because it's easy to criticize,
Yeah.
but what solution do you have in order to improve the issue?
In reference to educating people, I have been trying that for a number of years. I've met with ministers of education and trying to get my book, St. Martin, our state constitutional framework, within the school, because it's not being taught in there. They might teach, well, how many ministers we got or who is a minister. No, you have to understand
The
the
process.
structure from the kingdom part all the way down. It's not being taught, and to me, there's no political will
Okay.
in government to teach this.
Let me get this in, because I think this is important. It seems to me that there are times when our political leaders and government operate in a way that they either is not aware that we are not independent. We are within a framework, a structure that you're talking about, and you don't operate within the confines of such settings a certain way. When you're independent, you can, of course, operate a certain way, and we make that mistake many times.
Yeah, and we continue to do it. Okay, because here again, their own personal thing. I've been listening to a guy on the radio today, a parliamentarian, future or parliamentary elect, and constantly was coming from I. How can I work in a parliamentary system of government? Its government is not made up of I.
Yeah.
It's made up of a coalition.
Yeah,
and quickly, I want to say this too before going.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and this is another thing I want people, the elected, to be mindful of. There's much talk about electoral reform, and what it leans towards what? Removing, changing, amending Article 59 of the Constitution. Fellow St. Martiners, Article 59 is there for your protection. Okay? And do not wait until it happens to say something, or else we'll be in the same position, and I hate to say that, as St. Eustatius. People, we need to start talking now. Article 59 basically talks about everything that if government is dissolved, right, that we go back to elections. In a parliamentary system, once the government or council of ministers do not have that kind of support in parliament, then
Should go
the
back to
government
the
dissolved.
people.
If we remove that, then what we're saying now, that at any time, persons in parliament
Parliament
could feel, well, I don't like this, so we're going to shift. Somebody going to jump, we're going to do this, and at any time,
So it will only get worse
reform
before
of
it
a
gets
government.
better.
Yeah, you see,
Right.
and the key thing in democracy, you have to go back to the electorate once the persons that they voted in cannot work together.
You know, getting back to the issue of and I heard it too. I keep saying all the time.
I didn't hear that.
No, I heard it. The whole issue is when you're in parliament, as it is, you want to get legislation passed, it takes 8 out of the 15.
Yeah.
So you have to try to convince, if not your own, but even those on your other side as to this legislation, as to what impact it has, what it is you feel it can accomplish, and get them to vote on your proposal or whatever in order to get it passed. But you need 8 out of the 15. And I keep telling persons,
Why-
it is not easy.
Why 8?
Because it's a majority of the 15. It's a
But
majority.
that's not much of a majority either.
Look, 8 is more than 7.
That's a majority.
You know, and that's
It's a
all you
simple
need.
majority.
It's simple. All you need is a
So,
majority of one.
In some
I know
cases,
you.
you need 2/3.
Yes. But in this case, his friend, I think, is who says 10 is you needed to
No,
pass laws.
but
But in
it,
this
said,
case,
it is written that you need 8 plus, you need half
plus 1, half
Yeah,
plus 1.
half plus 1.
Exactly. So half of the 15.
And when you round it off, you need 9 or 10, not 8. 8 is not enough. Why no one is comfortable with an 8-seat majority? They always would do whatever necessary to get it wider.
You know why they're not
Because that's
comfortable?
weak.
No, you know why they're not comfortable? I mean, 8 is not a big number,
No,
but
exactly.
they're not comfortable with that because of, again, the I. They fail to realize in the parliamentary system of government, and the parties that form the coalition has the majority. Okay? So therefore, what you do, you have to caucus before. You have to come into parliament on an agreement that these persons going to, you stick together as a party.
Okay,
and
8.
you come,
8.
Exactly.
and then you come.
So what when you need 10 people to pass a piece of legislation
you-
because there are requirements?
You reach out across the aisle.
That's it.
Okay,
So
and
you
I've
don't-
always said governing is about consensus building. So you don't create a vacuum, just you or your 8. No, you reach out. But we constantly in
see what
an
you're
election mode.
Yeah.
We constantly competing. We even compete against ourselves.
Yes, unfortunately.
You find a person goes to parliament today and throw down a motion or what have you. Mind you, he's from the majority, and it doesn't pass. How in heaven's name that you're part of a majority and you're going to put a motion on the table and it fails?
Well, if some of the members are absent, that can be the good.
Now you
You
have to
don't
ensure.
go to the floor with a
Uh,
motion
exactly,
unless
unless you have the
your
support,
caucus
the
and you have the
majority.
support.
That's true.
There
That is
again,
true.
understanding of not only a parliamentary system of government.
Government. Right.
But it's true, and Julio, what you said
Agree.
correctly, you must caucus for us. There should be no surprise on the floor of Parliament. At the same time, yes, I know you have an individual responsibility, but at the same time, if I'm going to come with a proposal, whatever, I got to make sure that I have the support of the majority before I bring it to
We are
Parliament.
not guilty though of holding a lot of things to our chest, even in Parliament,
Uh,
here on St. Martin.
that possibility exists depending on what it is, but it doesn't make any sense because the fact is, if I'm holding something to my chest that goes for the people,
Yeah.
why do you hold it to yourself?
All
Does
right,
it
I
make
want to
sense?
give you the final word. I'm ready to
Yes,
go.
again, I just want to say thanks for having me on the program. I enjoy the presence of Julio. We could do this sometime in the future again. And again, to the voters that voted for me and those that voted in general, and for those that got elected as the 15 members of Parliament, much success. First and foremost, we need strong leadership,
Yeah,
and leadership that will listen
to the people.
to what is said and listen to what is not said. Again, thank you very much for having me this afternoon.
Listen to what is said and listen to what is not said. All right, Julio,
And
you're leaving tomorrow.
but I'll be back. And the key here, I said, is I would say again to the electorate, be mindful of this. And from the third concept, it's taking away from the political process, your democratic process, and even to the point of infringing on your human rights. And again, this whole thing about the national government, we don't need a national government. We need a strong government who has a governing program, a sustainable economic development program to take them on to the next level.
Yeah.
Be mindful of those who are talking about moving away from or getting rid of Article 59. That is your savior.
I can sense a lot of gasoline and fire around what you've just said. I hope you can live with some of the criticisms that you may face. All right, well, thank you both for sharing the time with me. I appreciate it. I want to applaud your courage and strength. You look fresh as a rose. Maybe you needed a break. All right, folks, that's it for today. I want to thank my two guests for sharing the time with me and the callers as well who contribute. We'll be back again tomorrow with another interesting program. Please come and join us then. From all of us, thanks for listening and for watching. Goodbye.